came up to Scotland to buy a lifeboat, which is kind of a strange thing to do, but actually I want to downscale and I want to have a more sustainable life. So I'm going to give up my flat in London, really expensive flat, and move on to the river.
Okay, so tell us, in what ways will this lifeboat be more sustainable?
The lifeboat costs about £5,000 or £6,000, and what it'll do, it'll reduce my. At the moment, I'm spending too much money on renting a flat in London, and I'll reduce it down to maybe £1,000 a year to live in the centre of London or around London. You have to move around, so I'll be chugging around the canals and rivers of London.
Excellent. Now, will you have to pay any kind of fees to be able to do that?
Yes, on a boat on a river you have to pay about £600 a year licence, plus insurance is about £150, and you have to pay a few other things. So it costs about a little less than £1,000 a year to run a boat.
Now, tell us a little bit about how you're going to stock your boat.
The boat comes with 60 seats. It's 7.2 metres and it's bright orange and round like a submarine, and it comes with 60 seats. So the first thing is to take out all the central seats to open up the space, and then there should be a big open space, and it lacks windows. It's got a small hatch, transparent hatch at the front, and sort of biggish windows at the back. So the centre, it's going to be quite dark, but I don't want to cut holes in it, because to cut holes in it would actually reduce the structural strength of the boat, and actually I want to cross the English Channel and do a little bit of sailing across seas, just a little bit. It'll be uncomfortable, but it'll be safe. Because it's a lifeboat, it can't sink.
Now, will you be able to fill it with groceries for a long period of time?
Yes, obviously, we'll fill it up with food. It comes with, I think it comes with food for 60 people for a week. It actually comes with dry supplies. I'm not sure if the dry supplies will be in there, but in theory it comes with all this dried food.
So will you be able to cook or refrigerate anything?
It comes with nothing, no. It comes with no cooking. I think the water is in containers, big plastic containers, so I'll have to set up a stove, I'll have to set up drainage, water systems. I'd have to set up it doesn't have a toilet, obviously. It probably has a bucket. So actually, but I plan just for this summer, I plan just to camp out in it, take the central section out to open up the space, then just sling a hammock and just, basically camp out on the river. I'd have to dig a hole for the toilet, sneak out in the middle of the night, and I just pop out to the shops and things and get lots of takeaways.
Now here's an important question. What was the impetus to you deciding to do this?
It's been something I've thought about for quite a few years. I think most people do. The impetus, I was searching on the internet and I found these lifeboats, because it seems that that people are selling the oil rigs. The average oil rig worker has become much larger, much fatter. So the existing lifeboats, they don't actually fit in the lifeboats at the right numbers of people. So they have to scrap all the existing lifeboats. So there's all these, perfectly serviceable boats, well kept up, etc., all going suddenly very, very cheaply. So we've got this transition where they're all buying bigger lifeboats and replacing the existing ones. So it's an interesting time. So I just thought, I just searched the internet and found this guy selling them up in Scotland. He gets them in, he's getting 8 in supposedly the next time, and he sells them off. And people buy them for lifeboats, people buy them for different projects. But he seems to be quite curious about converting one into a liverboard. So he's found this particular model which has a flat stern and it's quite easy to take the stuff out of. So he's recommending that one. So I'm going to go up and see it and hopefully buy it, put it on a truck, drive it down to just outside London, drop it into the river, and hey presto, I've got a house.
And you can put everything you have in your apartment into the boat.
I've spent, just before I came up, I spent 3 days going through boxes and throwing stuff out. So I've just thrown out about 6 sacks full of rubbish, and I have to do the same again before I move it onto the boat, I think. So it's downscaling. I'm reducing my belongings hugely. Yeah, but it's interesting. I have to wait for this to finish. Okay, it's interesting coming up to Scotland. I've been trying to buy this lifeboat for the last probably 2 months, and they were supposed to be in a month ago. They're supposed to be off the rigs, but it was delayed. And then actually, then they were supposed to be in 3 days ago. So I booked a ticket a week ago. I thought I'd get a cheap ticket, come up to Scotland. And then I arrive and they still haven't come in. And now I've just discovered, after being here for 3 days, that actually they're going to be another 2 weeks at least. So I'm not sure when it's coming in. It seems a problem that they haven't actually come off the oil rig yet, because they haven't got the replacements. When one comes in to replace it, they take one off. And the replacements haven't arrived. Or there's some problem lowering the replacements. I don't know. Something's going on. So hopefully it's not all pie in the sky and I do buy a lifeboat. Because, I've been... it's quite an interesting metaphor. You know, I'm a filmmaker and a journalist. I've been campaigning about climate change for 20 years, and here I am finally buying a lifeboat. Because climate change is going to happen, and there's going to be all sorts of chaotic weather and crazy things. So maybe actually humanity needs a lifeboat.
Now, have you ever done anything like this before?
Yes. I have sailed. My father used to teach sailing at an outward bound school when I was a child. But, me being a child, I never took any notice. But I did actually hitchhike a sailing boat. I used to hitchhike all around the world, all around Europe and around the world. And one time I decided I was sitting in an Irish castle, and I was reading this yachting magazine, and it was all these ride shares offered. So I thought, hey, I could do that. I was there all summer in this Irish castle with some friends, some musicians, and autumn was coming, so it was time to move on because the castle was uninhabited in the winter. Just the water came through the walls and lots of fungus grew, but in the summer it was livable in. So I looked at this magazine and I thought that was great, so I set off hitchhiking from Ireland down through Europe, down to Lisbon, where it said you could hitchhike boats, and I tried to hitchhike a boat in Lisbon, it didn't work. So I then went along the Portuguese coast and went to Gibraltar. And actually I found 3 boats actually offered me around Gibraltar, and one was a Dutch Netherlands boat, I think, and it was a farmer who had sold his farm, bought a boat, and this German secretary had had an affair with her boss, and her boss wasn't going to leave his wife, so they'd both run away, and they were sailing across the Atlantic Ocean. So I hitchhiked this sailing boat and sailed across the Atlantic Ocean, which was a big sailing experience. And then recently I did a similar thing. I was in the Canary Islands this winter for 2 months, and I hitchhiked a sailing boat then, just asking around, hitchhiked a sailing boat for a day and a half, but on that one I got really, really seasick. So actually I'm not looking forward to going to sea in this lifeboat, because lifeboats are very bobby, they're not very stable. They don't sink, but they don't float very well.
What would you say, Hamish, to people that would say this is a silly idea? What would you say to them?
I think this is kind of crazy and sensible. The boat isn't that practical for living on because it lacks windows. And also I think it probably doesn't steer very well because it's designed for open ocean, so I'm not sure how well it'll steer within restricted waters. Also, it's quite a high boat, so actually it's going to be difficult to get under bridges. I'm going to come across some bridges I won't be able to get under. A person in London bought one and he put lots of concrete blocks on each end of the boat to weigh it down so he could get under the bridges. So I'm a little bit worried about that. Also, steering is difficult because it's a high boat, so it'll catch the wind and it'll be blown about the river. So, but it's built like a tank, so if it crashes into things, it should be okay. It's unsinkable. Even if I spring a hole, it'll just fill up with water; it won't sink. So it's kind of crazy, but also sensible. What can you say? It's relatively cheap, £5,000–6,000.
What do your family and friends think about this idea?
Originally I thought it was crazy, but they kind of came round to it, because I discussed, my life in London isn't really sustainable anymore, so I've either got to move out of London, and this seems a good option to do it. I hope it works out.
And to people that see this idea and think, I want to do something like this, what would you say to them?
Do a search on the internet and look out for my experience and see all the things I do wrong, and then learn from that and then do it, because hey, it's not that expensive, Try it.
What are some of the risks that you take with doing this?
The risk is that I buy a turkey and the engine doesn't work, or the boat springs a leak. Boats do spring leaks and it starts to sink. The engine doesn't work. The engine costs probably £1,000 or £2,000 to repair. The advantage is that the engines are unused. They've been sitting there for 5 or 10 years and just started up every 6 months, and they've been well looked after because it's an emergency boat. So the engine should be fine, but if the engine isn't fine, then the expenses on boats can soon add up if things go wrong. So I'm hoping it's not going to go wrong because it's designed to be very robust. This is my hope. So actually I have a few years without things going wrong, which, I think is hopefully true, but I might end up being sold a turkey, and it might not start, it might spring a leak, So, and also, you can very easily crash into things. It does have a fiberglass hull. It's very strong, but, it will, you can make a hole in it. And other boats might crash into me. That happens a lot on the inland waters. A lot of people rent boats and they don't really know how to sail them, so you're always bashing into things. And, normally these boats are made of steel, so fiberglass boat won't be quite as strong. So I'm a little bit worried about that. But just, keep well aware, keep a good eye out.
I see you driving by.
Yes, they might. Yes. Especially if I go to sea, all these ships might stop. So actually, I think I'm going to paint it. I think I have decided to paint it green. I think, but again, it's quite a lot of work. You can't have damp weather when you're painting, so you can't actually do it in the water easily. And also, you've got to sand it all down, so it's a lot of work. But you can't paint it direct. The paint will just come off. But you can paint them. You use house paint, seaside house paint, external paint for houses. It's relatively cheap. So I'm going to paint the top bit green and leave the bottom bit orange. Green and orange, I have to kind of maybe do a model and see what it looks like.
So I have a very important question. Will your lifeboat have a lifeboat?
That's a good question. On the inland waterways, it won't. Going to sea, I think if I did go across the channel, I'd probably do it buddied up with another boat. Because you've only got one engine, so if it fails, you're adrift. And that's happened to me on my sailing boat when I sailed across the Atlantic. The engine failed when we were going out of the harbour and we were going to be washed up on the rocks, but this other boat was going by and threw a line and towed us back into the harbour. So I think if I was doing something crazy like that, I'd buddy up with another boat and do two at the same time so they could help each other out. So I don't think and the boat is unsinkable. It literally is unsinkable. You can't actually sink it. So I think, yeah. So no, it won't have another boat.
And you store it over the winter. You won't live in it.
Well, in theory, I should live in this over the winter because storing it, the ice comes and, these boats get vandalised a lot because, they're kind of in out-of-way places. So either I should live on it or I should rent it out and someone else should live on it. But initially, it's not going to have a stove in it, so it's going to be really cold in the winter. So I have to get a stove in, heating, water. There's tons of work to do, and I'm not going to do that for the first year. So I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do this winter. It's another thing that's up in the air. And also, I'm supposed to be going away for 2 or 3 months this winter, and here I am stuck with a boat. So it's kind of. So
are you worried at all that you're going to get out there on your boat and then miss your convenient flat in London?
I could see that happening, yes. I could see I think it's quite isolated. It's going to be dark and isolated. But there's a strong community on the British rivers. So swings and roundabouts, I don't know. But it's £5,000, £6,000, £7,000, it's kind of, I can always sell it on. So it's not a huge risk. As long as I don't sink it, I can sell it to someone and keep my money. So it's kind of an adventure.
Do you see yourself in any way as a role model for other people that want to do sustainability projects?
I think there's a whole thing about downscaling, spending less of your life working on things you don't really care about and more of your life doing things you want to do. But to do that, you've got to spend much less money. And you can do that. You can move to the countryside, you can buy a boat, you can go and live in a foreign country. Lots of people do it. And I would recommend people do that more. So my option is, my life is unsustainable in London. I don't have enough wage to actually pay the rent anymore. So is to buy the boat and then, actually this river Lee comes in and out of London, so I can sail up the Lee and then sail down again. So when I want some countryside, I go to the countryside. When I want some city, I sail into the city. So it seems like a perfect life. I'll discover as I do it. And then actually I've got this whole plan that actually after next year, that maybe I'll take the boat across the channel and then go through the waterways of Europe and actually go all the way down to the Mediterranean and then through the rivers and canals of Europe and into Russia and down to the Black Sea, which is, the whole thing's navigatable and relatively straightforward. So it is technically possible to do that.
Okay, I have a very important question. Will you be inviting us to come party on your lifeboat?
Certainly, it won't be very big, but you can certainly come and visit. Yes.